whether you've seen it, but Numbers chapter 12, verse 3, it's written by Moses, and it's the subject of quite a few internet memes. Now Moses, this is Numbers chapter 12, verse 3, written by him, he says, "Now Moses was a very humble man, more humble than anyone else on the face of the earth." There you go, there's a few of the memes there for you. You can check them out all yourself. It's kind of hard to ignore the casual humble brag there from Moses. More humble than anyone else on the face of the earth. I think social media in this has got a lot to answer for. Each platform has a compelling mission statement about storytelling or connecting people, but they've actually just given a home to memes. That's the main thing that's there. Memes, selfies, and amplified the humble selfie, the casual humble brag. And social media gives us all a chance to show off to a much larger audience than any normal person would have had before. The selfie in itself is a potential brag, but to offset the latent narcissism that's in the selfie, you can add a self-deprecating caption to your selfie, and thus the humble brag is born. A critical comment to cover up for your boast. A statement of modesty while also drawing attention to yourself. Here are some classic tweets that I found. "Man, this is so unfair. Why did the Lambo dealership not tell me I'd get pulled over at least once a week in this car? Time for a Corolla, lol." Or this humble brag, "I just did something very selfless," and then tweeted about it. But more importantly, it was genuine, and I know it means a lot to the person in the long run. Hashtag so worth it. Man, what a humble brag. That's a good one. That's good. I really don't think they get it at all. Can they see what they're doing, what they're saying? The unintentional humble brag is a common form of self-deception, a false humility. We have an astonishing ability to ignore the truth and convince ourselves of a lie. We believe so many untruths about ourselves and our actions because we've got used to the fake and the phony. Real humility is actually so hard to find and so hard to live out. And yet God says to us, He says He requires of us, He says He wants this from us, to act justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly. We talk the talk, but we find it so hard to walk the walk. In churches, we talk a really good game, but we fail to back it up with how we live. But there's another layer to it. It's not just that we say one thing and do the other. You can't just fake it with external actions. It's easier to look humble than to actually be humble. It's easier to look humble than to actually be humble. Personally, I love a good to-do list. I love ticking things off. I get to write them all the time. I get great satisfaction from adding ticks to the list. But this isn't an item that you can tick off your to-do list. Be more humble today. Tick. Nailed it. Yeah. Humility is hard because you can't just talk it. You've got to actually walk it. And you can't just walk it. You've got to feel it. It's a matter of the heart. And our hearts, well, they flatter to deceive us. In my teens and early 20s, I was doing my best to look like I was following Jesus. I wasn't meaning to fake it, but sometimes, well, my actions didn't match my words. Or my heart didn't match my actions. I talked humility, but deliberately drew attention to myself at the same time. I was trying to impress people. And even when I talked humility, even when I acted on it, my heart was loving some of the attention. I was just trying to fit in. I was just trying to feel loved. I was doing things that I thought God wanted. I was a good kid. I went to church. I got up and I sang and I played the guitar. Isn't that what God wants? Isn't that what God wants? Isn't that what He likes? Doesn't He like pop worship songs played on acoustic guitar? Isn't that what He really wants from us? Well, we need to continually open ourselves up to what God has to say. And allow His Spirit to challenge us, to comfort us, but also to convict us. And sometimes you need a friend to tell you what you can't see about yourself, or to ask the hard questions about what's going on behind the scenes. And sometimes it's a song. I'll bring you more than a song, for a song in itself is not what you have required. You search much deeper within through the way things appear. You're looking into my heart. And I'm coming back to the heart of worship. I remember singing this song. I remember all the questions that this song asked of me. Or would you sing it if no one was watching? Will you act on the words that you sing? Will you let God take all of the glory? Will you give God your whole heart? With the song, The Heart of Worship, well, it's the words of Micah 6, just to a different tune. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow down before the exalted God? Shall I come before Him with burnt offerings? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams? And He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with your God. He wants more than a song, more than burnt offerings, more than thousands of rams. He wants your heart, a heart of justice and mercy and humility, a heart like His. And He wants you to act like Him, to love like Him, and to walk with Him. And we think we can separate words and actions. We think we can separate actions and the heart. But it's all connected. Mind, heart, hands, it's all connected. A friend shared this fascinating image the other day. I spent a long time pondering it. Our bodies are interconnected. This is a heat map image. Showing how the emotional state that we're in is reflected in our bodily reaction. Our emotional state reflected in our bodily reaction. We might say different things with those emotions. We might act in different ways, but these heat maps, they did a bunch of studies. These heat maps are relatively common. No matter what actions you might do or the words you might say, our body says the same thing. And there's a lot to reflect on in that image. I can imagine actually doing a whole sermon series about these. But for the moment, let's take a look at pride. I'll circle it for you. There it is. I just want to draw your attention to the way that pride, which is the opposite of humility. Pride burns in the mind and in the heart. I haven't looked into the science behind all of this, but at face value, it makes a lot of sense. Pride, it forms in our thoughts and in our feelings. Self-esteem, well, it turns into being self-absorbed. Our egos are puffed up only to become suddenly deflated. You can't fake humility. You can't fake it because it's about what's going on in your heart. No amount of the right words, the right actions, they can't make you humble. So where do we start? Or how do we keep going? How can we assess our hearts, check our motives? Well, we walk with God, walk humbly with your God. We walk with Him as our God and with us as His people. And that relationship, well, that sets the foundation for the life that we live. That sets the perspective, sets our hearts towards humility. And take a moment to dwell on these words individually. Who am I before the Lord of the universe? Who am I and yet He cares for me? Who am I before the Creator of all things and yet He knows me? Who am I before the holy God and yet He loves me completely? Who am I before the King of all kings? And yet he walks with me. Well, who is he? Well, he is our God. And who are we? We are his people. Humility is the only right response. It's the only perspective that makes sense of any of those statements. We understand ourselves in the context of who God is, who he's revealed himself to be. John Calvin, he writes this: it's evident that we never attain to a true self-knowledge until we have previously contemplated the face of God and come down after such contemplation to look into oneself. Contemplate the face of God and then have a look at yourself. Look to God, look to you. That's going to be humbling. Look to God and look to you. You're going to be humbled, and that's good and right and true. And we spend so much time trying to create an image for ourselves. There were a few video games that I played as a kid, teenager, maybe into my 20s. You could create your own character. I'd spend hours getting the details right of my character, the face shape, the right shade of brown hair, the bulging biceps, obviously. It's how I looked, or at least what's importantly is how I wanted to be seen. And has anything really changed? Your social media profile, the clothes you wear, the way you act, the purchases that you make, has anything really changed? Or we create an image of who we think we are or who we want to be. But God reveals himself to us, and we see ourselves in light of him. Humility starts with worship. As I said a couple of weeks ago, do whatever you need to do. Do what is going to make you worship more, what's going to draw you into worship. Take a walk, marvel at God's creation, sing or write songs of praise, serve with the gifts that you've been given. Write down ways that God has answered your prayers. Open Psalms. Dig deep into his word. What is it that lifts your eyes, that lifts your heart towards him? Well, do that. Do that. Because if you want to walk humbly, then worship wholeheartedly. There's so much I could say about humility, and in some ways this is a little precursor to Wednesday night. Duncan talks about pride. I reckon humility is the topic that I've probably preached on the most in my life. I keep coming back to it. I think A, because I need to hear it, and we need to hear it. And B, because the Bible talks a whole lot about it, and I can't escape that. And C, because I've heard so many wrong ideas of what humility is. There are too many guilt trips of how sinful you are and how ashamed you should be. And too many self-help style messages about loving who you are and living your best life. And too many misunderstandings of ego and self-esteem. Whenever this topic comes up, I recommend that people read Tim Keller's book. It's really short. It's called The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness. And in it, he nails all the big points, and you can read the book in about half an hour. It's very short. I've read it a bunch of times, and I was going to reread it in preparation for tonight's message, but I went to find my copy, and I couldn't. So if, in the past, when I've said, if you want to read this book, and I lent it to you, well, I'd love it back. It would be great, but I can just buy it again. But anyway, in the book, he talks about self-forgetfulness. Takes the focus off ourselves, reorients the world, not with ourselves at the center, but with God at the center. And in that, we find freedom and rest in humility. You don't have to think about yourself. You don't have to think about yourself at all. In chapter 2 of Micah that we read earlier, it's a warning to those who focus on themselves. It's a rebuke to those who put themselves at the center. Woe to you, God says, you will no longer walk proudly. I really only want to focus on two ideas from the passage, but in order to do that, we need to take a quick look at the bigger picture. It begins, woe to those who plan iniquity, to those who plot evil on their beds. Now, this evil is premeditated and unashamed. They do it in broad daylight. At morning's light, they carry it out because it is in their power to do it. And that is the true test of our faithfulness. When we have power to do evil, when we're capable of it, but then we choose not. When we're tempted by it, but we resist. Verse 2, they covet fields and seize them and houses and take them. They defraud people of their homes. They rob them of their inheritance. The powerful are preying on the poor. And coveting is lust and desire, all for selfish gain. The very opposite of the heart of humility. And because God's people are doing these things, he says he's going to step in. Therefore, the Lord says, I am planning disaster against this people. It's slightly obscured in the NIV, but essentially, by using the word disaster, the NIV makes it sound a little bit nicer than what it actually is. I don't know, disaster doesn't sound that good, does it? It's literally the same word that they translated evil in verse 1. And now we know from other parts of the Bible that the God cannot do anything evil. And so that's why the NIV's chosen a different word, the word disaster, that God says, I'm planning disaster against my people. And it's within the semantic ranges of the Hebrew. Don't worry, they haven't stuffed it up. But in doing so, in obscuring it, that we've lost some of the force of the statement. Because this is the real bombshell. That just as the proud, they plan evil. They plan disaster. That's what we read in verse 1. Well, so God will plan evil. God will plan disaster against his people. When God comes as judge, when he holds his people to account, well, they cannot save themselves. Like an animal with its neck trapped in a yoke. In verse 3, you will no longer walk proudly, for it will be a time of calamity. That's that same Hebrew word, the evil disaster word. It will be a time of evil, disaster, calamity. You will no longer walk proudly, for it will be a time of calamity. In that day, people will ridicule you. They'll taunt you with this mournful song. Proud no more. God is going to bring them low. And they'll be taunted and ridiculed along the way. That's how seriously God takes pride. That's the first point that I really want to hone in on. God doesn't allow pride to remain. He wants to rid the world of it, rid his people of it. If they won't choose humility, if they won't see themselves as they truly are, if they won't see God as he truly is, well then he's going to bring them crashing down. Pride comes before a fall. It's not just a catchy saying, that's Proverbs 16 verse 18. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Australian culture has this whole thing, a difficulty with bringing people down. We love to back the underdog, we cut the tall poppy down. That's our thing, but that's not our place. No, God is the one who comes as judge. He's the only one who's fit to judge. But for some reason, we revel in the fall, whether it's a high-profile politician or a sports person or a celebrity, we revel in their fall. I don't want to see you fall. I don't want to be the one to bring you down either. But I do want to warn you. I want to warn you, if you're proud, if you're self-seeking, if you're self-centered, then one day it's all going to fall apart. God is bringing a disaster from which you cannot save yourself. So heed the warning. Heed the warning. Maybe it's just an arrogant attitude you have right now. Maybe that's all it is. Maybe it's some selfish decisions that you've been making. Maybe it's pride that has taken root secretly in your heart. Pride is self-defeating. Pride's never ending. Tim Keller, in that book I mentioned earlier, he says this. He says, pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next person. And so it's a constant comparison. It's an endless pursuit. And if we allow it, well, then it's going to consume us. Pride, it also makes us less likely to hear and to listen to others' voices. We've elevated ourselves so far that our ears are blocked. Our hearts are hard. That's what Micah 2 is talking about in verse 6. It says, do not prophesy, their prophets say. Do not prophesy about these things. Disgrace will not overtake us. Don't tell us this bad news. Don't tell us the bad news. We don't want to hear it. Instead, we want the prophets who tell us that we're all going to be okay. And Micah is almost mocking them in verse 11. If a liar and deceiver comes and says, I will prophesy for you plenty of wine and beer, well, that would be just the prophet for this people. Life isn't just flowing with wine and beer. Pleasure is not the purpose of life. Greed is not the goal. You are not the hero of the story. It's all a lie. It's all a false hope, a false comfort. Who are you listening to? What voices are you letting shape your actions and your heart? Who are you really following? And for 20 years, the Israelites ignored what Micah had to say, and he kept proclaiming the truth. And King Jotham and King Ahaz, they didn't want to hear what he had to say. The people kept on ignoring God. And then finally, King Hezekiah, he listened. He listened and repented. Tonight is a chance for each one of us to hear God's warning, to reorient your life around Him, to lay down pride, pick up humility. Ultimately, God will not let pride remain. So let Him rid your heart of selfish gain. How do we do that? How do we let God rid our heart of selfish gain? Well, we need the breaker. The breaker to break open our stone cold hearts and remake them like His. Verse 13, the one who breaks open the way will go up before them. They will break through the gate and go out. Their king will pass through before them, the Lord at their head. In some translations, in verse 13, when they talk about this, they speak of the breaker. I love it, like a title. Here comes the breaker, a superhero identity or a wrestling nickname, the one who breaks open the way. On our own, we can't save ourselves. On our own, the end is calamity, but the breaker, Micah says, will come. And not only does He make the way, He leads the way. The king will pass through, the Lord at their head. He will break it open, and He will go up before the people. Not only does He make the way, but He leads the way. Now, like last week, it's hard not to see allusions of the Exodus here. A God who broke the hardened heart of Pharaoh. God who broke them out of slavery in Egypt. He led them out. He parted the Red Sea, broke it open, and led them through it. He led them through the wilderness, a pillar of cloud by day, pillar of fire by night. Just like last week, Micah also points forward to Jesus, the breaker, the King, the Lord. Well, it's Jesus. He makes the way, and He's the one who walks the way before us. His life, His death, His resurrection, well, that's what makes the way. That's what breaks open our proud hearts. That's what remakes us. His life, his death, his resurrection, that's how he leads the way before us. He is the Lord at our head, the captain, the leader, the trailblazer. He makes humility possible. He makes it possible. If for me, in my life, what have I seen change in me? Well, I'm not so concerned about what people think. So to break that to you, but I'm not too concerned about it. And I'm not here to perform. This isn't a show. But what I do want to see is I want to see other people grow. I'd love to find someone who's a better preacher than me, a better worship leader than me, raise them up. God makes humility possible. And I'm not saying I've got it all together, don't hear that. But he is working in me. What about for you? What about for you as you serve as part of our community? Or if you're on the worship team, then make sure you can praise in your bedroom, at home, no one's watching, before you get up on the stage. If you're a kids leader, youth leader, make sure you actually care about young people, that you actually want to take an interest in their life, in who they are. Or if you do something like AV or some other background thing that no one really notices until it goes wrong, no one notices. If you're in a background role, then be okay. Be okay with serving without being seen at all. All of that and many more examples I give, all of that takes humility. What about for you in your life, day to day? Well, humility looks like taking an interest in others. Really, truly listening to people takes humility. Praying before you make any plans, like actually asking the Lord of the universe what he thinks before you just go and do it. Acknowledging that God is God, well, that takes humility. Or even the justice and mercy that we looked at the last 2 weeks, well, both of those require humility to live it out. And with Jesus at the head, with Jesus who makes the way and leads the way, well, then all of this is possible. So don't trust in yourself. Don't allow yourself to follow anyone but Jesus. Because he has conquered every wall that could stand in your way. He's broken every chain. He has won the victory. Are you weighed down by sin? Well, he has nailed it to the cross. Do you fear death? Well, he has triumphed over the grave. Are you weighed down by mental illness? Well, he breaks every stronghold. Do you worry about what's coming? Well, he holds the future in his hands. And nothing can stand against him. Nothing can stand against him, and he goes before you. So walk with him. Walk with him. We've got a choice of who we're going to follow. In chapter 4, Micah says this. He says, all the nations may walk in the name of their gods. All the nations may walk in the name of their gods, but we will walk in the name of the Lord, our God, forever and ever. The world may walk one way. Your friends might tell you to walk like them. The allure of the gods of this age will tempt us to walk like them. But we will walk in the name of our Lord, to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God.